In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this card trick block. This is a very simple way of doing it. Traditionally it would have used lots of half square triangles. This one is made from squares and rectangles, so it's quick and it's simple, but it's really effective. Now I've just made mine into a little mat and put some binding around it. If you wanted to quilt it, then that's absolutely fine. You could maybe just stitch around the edge of the card trick shape or quilt all over it. That is entirely up to you. And I've just used an 80-20 wadding in the centre of this because I see it being more as just a little mat or maybe a wall hanging. But if you wanted to use a thermal or a heat resistant wadding, then that would make a nice little placemat as well. The finished size is 12 inches square. If you wanted to make more of these and join them together to make a quilt, when you see how quick and how simple this is to make, you can understand that you're going to have quite a large quilt in quite a short space of time. So enough talk. Let's get sewing. So these are my patchwork pieces. I have 4 pieces in contrasting fabric, which measure 4.5 inches by 2.5 inches. And it's quite nice if these are very contrasty. Even if you have them in 4 completely different plain colours would work really well as well, so that the shape of the card trick really stands out. And also from the same fabrics I've cut a 2.5 inch square from each one, and I've got 4 white 2.5 inch squares. White's going to be the colour of my background fabric. So the way that this works, the 4 centre pieces are going to join together like this. And then these pieces are going to go around the edge like this. So you can start to see that overlapping kind of shape that these make. And the white pieces are just going to go into each corner like so. So let's pop those together in the centre first of all. Do be aware of the direction of your fabric if you have a directional print. If it's plain or spotty like that, it doesn't really matter, but it's nice to have these in the same direction, because if they're joined together like that, it's going to be obvious that it's not one piece, and we want these to kind of look as though they're one piece of fabric that's slipped underneath and has been joined together. So let's do these centre pieces first of all. You'll need 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I've already put my 1/4 inch foot on my sewing machine already. That really does help. And then I like to keep these laid out so I can see exactly what I'm doing with them. So that's the direction I want them to go. And we'll sew these 2 right sides together first of all. So just matching up the edge. And sew. And then the same with these 2 pieces, right sides together, and we'll sew. I don't normally pin with little pieces like this unless I'm matching seams. So just snip those 2 pieces apart, and we'll give those a quick press. And I'm going to press the seams in opposite directions. So that seam's going that way, so this seam needs to go this way. And then we'll sew these pieces together, and because I've made the seams go in opposite directions, when I put the pieces together they butt up against each other, so you get a nice point in the centre, and that's really going to stand out, so that's important that those seams meet. And we'll press that again. There's a lot of pressing going on, but that's important. I don't mind which direction that's pressed in. You could press the seam open if you prefer, or in whichever direction it feels as though it wants to go. Oops, just got a bit caught there. and then we'll sew 2 side pieces on. So I'm going to go with the teal one here and make sure that these are the right way round, so the direction is the same. Let's turn this over, and again we'll sew this right sides together. And the same with this side, making sure that my birds are the same way around. Line up the edges and sew. And again we'll press that. It's quite handy to have one of these little irons at the side of your sewing station, so you don't have to get up and go to the ironing board every time. And they're quite handy for small projects like this as well. Now before we put these pieces on, we need to attach them to the white pieces. So 1 white square at each end. So it's actually quite a quick block to put together, this one. And it's quite big. It'll have a finished size of about 12 inches. So if you are making a quilt, then it's going to come together quite quickly. And of course you can add sashing and borders as well. So this is just the basic block with a little border around it. So it's a good kind of introduction actually into patchwork, because it is quite simple. And I think it's quite nice if it's the first thing you've ever made, that it looks quite complicated. It's something that you're proud of and you know that you can show off, but isn't that difficult and doesn't take very long to make. So again, just sewing the white bits onto the end of each one of these. And guess what? Yep, we're going to give it a press. And so if you want to press the seams open or in, you know, away from the light side, then that's entirely up to you. I'm not too fussed, to be honest. Right, now these need to go here and here. So let's flip this over right sides together, and it's quite important that you match these seams up, because if it's a little bit off, it spoils the illusion of that being one piece of fabric. So right sides together again. It may be an idea to pop a pin in the seam, just to make sure that they're going to meet. Like so. And then we'll sew. Remember to remove your pins at the last minute. Just lining that up again. And the same with this side. So again, I'm going to pin. And into that seam there. Right, let's take that out and we'll press it. So that already is really starting to look quite effective. I do find it useful as well to keep laying out the pieces. No matter how many quilts I've sewn in the past, I still find it easier to just keep laying them out and laying them out, just to make sure that everything is being sewn together in the right order and in the right place. That's my little way of doing it anyhow. So that's how we're looking. But to make this into a card trick, it needs to be on point. It needs to be in a diamond shape like this. So what we need to do is to make these corners square. So I have two 7-inch white squares, and I'm going to chop these in half diagonally. So I'm going to make two half square triangles. Like so. And these are going to be sewn to each side of this section. So top, bottom, side and side. So to make sure I get this centrally, I'm going to put a little crease at the halfway mark here. Here, you can finger crease that if you like. I just find it a little bit more crisp when I use the iron. There and there. And the same on all of these triangles as well. So I'm just going to mark the centre, and that's where we're going to match them up. Okay, let's sew these together. So I'm not going to pin this time. I'm just going to place the two creases together here, line up the edges and sew all the way down. These triangles are longer than the block, but that really doesn't matter. Same on this side. And we are going to trim this down and make it square as well. So this will be actually slightly larger than we need for our 12-inch block. So press that away and press this one away. And then these line at the centre and sew all the way down. This is going to overlap in the corner, and that's absolutely fine. And there's my final triangle. And again, we're going to press. Now this is going to be laid over the top of your wadding before we trim it down. So I've cut the wadding slightly larger, and then I'm just going to use the machine out the way, a little bit of 505 spray just to hold that in place. If you don't have a 505 spray, don't worry about it. It's not a huge quilt. It'll sit in place quite easily, but that just helps to keep everything nice and flat. And then this in turn is going to go over the top of my backing fabric, which is cut larger than the wadding. And then we can trim all of this to the same size. Just got a little wrinkle there in my wadding. There we go. So let's just trim this back and make it square. If you're making several of these, if you are making a quilt, then it's important that every one of the blocks is exactly the same size. If you're just making a mat like this, it's really not important because you're not matching this up to anything else. So all I'm doing really is to trim off the edges, because for some reason it does go a little bit wobbly as you're sewing, just to make that nice and neat and the edges straight. So my finished size here is 12 inches by 12 inches. It's turned out to be a perfect 12-inch square. So the last thing we need to do here is to put the binding on, and I'm making the binding this time. So I've cut 2-inch wide strips of fabric. I'll need 2 of those, so I'm going to join them together first of all. So the way to do that would be to place the 2 pieces right sides together at an angle like this, and I'm going to sew diagonally across that line. So if you wanted to pop a pin in that, that's fine. I don't need my 1/4 inch foot on the machine anymore, so I'll just pop my standard foot back on again. So and then let's just trim this back to about 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters from the seam, and then we'll press it. Now if you're going to do a lot of this, if you're making a lot of bias binding, I would recommend getting a bias binding maker. So for a 2-inch strip of fabric you will need a 1-inch bias binding maker or a 2.5 centimeter bias binding maker. Just for this, because it's not very big, I'm going to just fold it and iron it. So I am going to use a little bit of best press. If you've got some spray starch, that will help as well, just to help to keep the creases in there while I'm ironing. Then I'm going to fold the whole thing in half. And then the long sides to the center, one at a time. So if you have a bias binding maker, this would happen all in one go. But it only takes a few minutes, so this isn't too time consuming. And then the second side to the center as well. So then let's take our block And I'm going to fold the end of the binding over and then line up the edges of the binding to the edge of my fabric. I'm not going to pin, and I'm going to sew in the first crease. And I'm going to miter the corners. So the way to do that is to figure out, let's see if you can see it clearer here. Nope. Where the end of the fabric is, which is here. And then I'm going to measure 1/2 inch in that way and stop sewing here. So this is 1/2 inch. I'm going to measure the same there. So if you're in centimetres, whatever the distance is here, you need to stop in that direction. And literally reverse stitch, cut your thread and take your work out. So you don't have to measure and mark that every single time, you'll get used to doing that by eye. So I've stopped sewing here, and then we're going to fold this around. So again the raw edges meet here, and I've got a nice triangle, and that's going to form the miter in the corner. So that's going to look really nice and smart and neat. So I'll show you again when we get to the next corner. So again, I'm going to stop about here. Take the work out, fold it over, line up the edges, try and make this nice and square here as well, so that folded edge is square, this lines up square, and then we'll sew right from the edge of the fabric and carry on sewing down. So same again, turn it around. And sew from the edge. Reverse, take it out, and that's my final corner. Now when I come to this bit here, I want it to overlap slightly, which is why I leave it to the last minute and not cut the fabric exactly. I just want it to overlap by about 1/2 inch or a centimetre or so. So again, carry on lining up the edge. I've just gone a little bit off the crease line there, so I'm going back again. And just make sure that when you come to here, that stitch matches that crease. So I've got a nice join there, and when I turn these corners over, I'll have that diagonal pleat in the corner, which just looks so professional and so neat. And then I'm going to hand sew from the back. I much prefer to do that. I know it's time consuming and not everybody likes to do it, but you don't see any stitches at the front, and you don't have to worry about matching the stitches at the back to the front. So although it may take a little bit longer to do it this way, then it's not as long as sewing it, not being happy, and then unpicking it and doing it all over again. So I'm going to start coming up to one of the corners so I can show you how that works. So basically you're going to fold the edge over and just cover the stitch line with the fabric. I'm going to start with my needle and thread in the seam allowance so you don't see the knot, and then fold this over. Then I'm going to take the thread into the base fabric and out into the fold of the binding fabric. So the needle isn't going all the way through. We don't want to see these stitches on the outside. If you wanted to put some clips around here to hold it in place as you're sewing, then that's fine. So I'm just catching a little bit of the fabric. The smaller your stitches, the more invisible they're going to be. And I'm only catching like a couple of threads of the fold of the fabric when I come over here. Now when I come up to the corner, because I want that nice mitre on both sides, I'm going to kind of manoeuvre the fabric as I'm approaching here and create another triangle shape so it mirror images what's on the other side. So I'm heading right up into the corner. And then just manipulate the fabric in the corner until you get that mitre shape. And then I just like to put a couple of stitches right in the bottom of that corner just to secure them. And we'll carry on all the way around. So I'm just coming back up to the beginning again. That was probably about half an hour's worth of sewing. So it can be quite quick. And then just tie off here with a knot. And I think one final press and my little mat is finished. So I hope you enjoyed that. Maybe you've learnt something from making it or taken a little bit of inspiration to start patchworking or quilting. If you have enjoyed it, then please subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up and a like, and I shall see you again next time. Bye bye.